And welcome to Talk of the Town. Thank you so much for tuning in this evening. My name is Lisa Dascoli, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Richard Skipper. Say hello.
Hello.
Whose birthday is day after tomorrow, so happy birthday in advance, my friend.
Thank you so much.
A lot of wonderful things to talk about this evening, and I'm very excited, and we have a phenomenal guest, which this is just thrilling to me. But I did want to do a quick shout out to a few people. Well, first of all, your birthday is Thursday. Another dear friend of mine from the Fort Lee Film Commission, his birthday is today, so happy birthday, Tom Meyer. Say a quick shout out to you.
Okay.
And just to mention that Playhouse 22 in East Brunswick is now performing until February 21st, the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. And tickets are $22. And I like to mention the local theaters for so many reasons. That's a big passion of mine. And I like to give them their platform because those are some of the hardest working folks out there, because it's just not, it doesn't make sense in a lot of realms to do something and put so much energy and effort, and there's no pay for these actors that are stepping on the stage. They're doing it for the pure love of it. So shout out to Playhouse 22. Please go and check them out for their production of Spelling Bee. North Brunswick Adult Drama Group is also doing The Music Man, March 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and North Brunswick, New Jersey Adult Drama Group. And our friends over at the Rhino Theater in Pompton Plains are also getting ready to do Scarlet Pimpernel, and that's the first 3 weekends of March. So there's always something to do, and you don't have to just go to the movies. There's other wonderful ways to have entertainment right in your backyard.
Well, we are very lucky that these theaters and these schools still exist.
Yes.
When funding is cut, the first thing to go is funding for the arts.
Absolutely.
And we're very lucky in Rockland County. There's so many schools, and once a year they do a whole outline of all of the theaters, and there must have been at least 75 different productions that are going on right now with high school productions.
I think,
and that's where we all got our start.
Yes, and there was the young lady who just recently was in The Wiz on television, the NBC version, and she started off at the Cranford Players. Mm-hmm. So I know that. I know several of my friends have worked with her, Charisse Williams. And so that's very exciting and it's a great experience. Kids who do theater never forget that experience, and it really does bring something to their character development and self-confidence. I can't say enough for it.
Well, I know that we're here tonight to talk with Peter about his wonderful book, The Great Parade, about the Broadway season of 1963-64. But he also has another book that you were very excited about.
Yes.
So why don't we start off by talking about that book?
I was going to have you talk about your weekend first, what's coming up this weekend.
I want to talk to Peter about Peter.
You know what? I want to talk to Peter about theater, too. And what we're talking about, folks, Peter Filichia is the former New York-based theater critic for the New York Star Ledger and New Jersey's News 12. Mr. Felicia has 2 weekly columns, Masterworks Broadway and Kritzerland, and for Music Theater International. He's also written for TheaterMania.com. So many wonderful accolades to throw at you. So, all right, who's going first? You or me?
You go first.
Thank
and
you.
Talk about our event.
Thank you so much.
Ladies first.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the show this evening.
Having me.
All right, so the show, the book, Let's Put on a Musical, How to Choose the Right Show for Your School, Community, or Professional Theater. Before we say anything, this is possibly, and I work with a couple local theaters, when we come to our season choosing what we're going to do for the season, it can dissolve into a fist fight.
Oh, it often does.
Yes.
And especially if somebody wants to play a certain role and is dead set against somebody else playing a certain role in another show. Certainly we have a lot of egos in community theater, but we also have a lot of talent, too. Mm-hmm. One of the great things about community theater is that you have a lot of people who are as talented as the people who are on Broadway. It's just that they wanted a different life. They wanted that paycheck every Friday, and they didn't want to go on auditions as a rule and as a daytime thing every day. So as a result, they wanted something else. They wanted perhaps marriage, children, stability, and but that doesn't mean they don't have the immense talent. I have been so moved so many times seeing productions here, there, and everywhere. A production of Minnie's Boys in Phoenix, Arizona in 1988, I still remember fondly. A production of My Fair Lady in Casper, Wyoming in 1981. I'm still mad at myself for not going backstage and saying to one of the boys backing up Eliza and Wouldn't It Be Lovely, you are great. You have no idea how wonderful you are. They don't know how wonderful you are, but you are really, you have star quality. I'm from New York. I'm a Tony voter. I mean, please listen to me. And I mention him all the time because I'm hoping he's listening out there, even though it's a long time ago. And I hope that he's actually a star that I didn't even get a playbill that night, so I didn't know who he was. But yeah, community theater was an amazing thing. And doing the book has turned out to be very rewarding on a number of levels. First off, after it was out for a while, they asked for a second edition with all the new shows that had come out in the interim. So it's been out there for quite a while, and it's never been out of print in the last, close quarter century now. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to use it as the handbook for our next season of Sitting Down. Now,
has it really been that long? I bought the book when it came out.
When you were a wee little lad.
Oh, my God.
Your aunt bought it for your birthday, those many Februarys ago. Yes. No, one of my favorite stories is the fact that it goes back to when I saw My Fair Lady on Broadway. There's a scene in which Eliza wipes her nose on her sleeve, and Henry Higgins says to her, "Oh, Eliza, use a handkerchief." And he gives her a handkerchief, and what the actress did was wipe her nose on her sleeve again, and then wipe the sleeve with the handkerchief. Okay. Now, here's my point. I put that in the book as a suggestion, saying, why not do that, And an actress once wrote me and said, I just got the part of Eliza Doolittle because at auditions, they gave me that scene to read, and when I did that, they thought I thought of that I improvised. They said, oh, we got to have this lady, and as a result, she got the part.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So at least that.
Delightful. See, as a person in local theater, we have the conundrum every season of picking shows that will sell and that will attract audience, and then there's that desire for artistic expression.
Sure.
We were speaking last month. I had a wonderful opportunity to see a production of The Normal Heart, and it was directed by a friend of mine, and I said to him afterwards, it blew me away. It was amazing. And you're talking about groups that don't have huge budgets, so how they get around it, also amazing. Simple set, but so impactful. And he said, please talk about the show because ticket sales are absolutely abysmal.
Yeah.
So, how do you get around that between choosing what is going to sell, how many times can we see Neil Simon, and something that's a little bit maybe more offbeat?
A friend of mine in Kansas, in Wichita, has a theater in which he does 5 productions a year. And what he says is that I can do one Maverick show a year. And if I do 2, I'm out of business. But if I can do the Strange title once, the other 4 have to be things they know because they will subsidize the production. And I think that's a good rule of thumb. And he's been in business for well over 30 years using that philosophy. And he's never varied from it. Because, people will forgive you one, but they won't forgive you 2.
Well, one of the things that I find that the biggest problem that a lot of regional theaters face is when a new artistic director comes in and they feel that they need to re-educate their audiences.
Absolutely.
And the audiences know exactly what they want. And I remember living in Rockland County, the whole demise of the Helen Hayes Theater.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
There, when they opened the new theater, their first show was a show that no one knew. And why any theater company would try to launch itself with no proven history with something that the public doesn't know about. And, you mentioned something a few moments ago, but I saw a high school production, 2 summers ago of Sweet Charity, a show that I don't think ever would have been done by my high school when I was growing up in South Carolina. But this young girl who played Charity Hope Valentine had every Fosse move down to a science. And she was a young Gwen Verdon up there on the stage. It was just thrilling to watch her work.
Out in Hackettstown, New Jersey, there's the Centenary Young Performers Workshop where Michael Blevins, who was actually in the movie of A Chorus Line and was also on Broadway in Chorus Line, has a young performers workshop where they do Pal Joey, they do Company, they do The Act, a Liza Minnelli show where a girl named Mary Beth Fritzky, I've never forgotten the name. It may not be a glamorous name for a marquee, but boy, was she good. Yeah, and Carl out there, Carl Wallno says, if you do not tell kids that something is impossible, they just go out and do it.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful thing because I have seen amazing work in high school productions. Amazing.
Yes.
Good. The Yankees used to have an ad campaign that said, "At any moment, a great moment." Meaning, if they were behind 9-0 in the ninth inning, you might see the longest home run ever hit. You might see an amazing play at third base. Theater's like that too. At any moment, a great moment. You can see wonderful things here, there, and everywhere, and rotten stuff on Broadway.
Well, absolutely agreed. 100% agreed. And I've had the opportunity to see both, and I treasure those moments that I get to see something wonderful, and I either learn something, or it doesn't always have to be so deep. I mean, I like to laugh too, and
Don't we all?
if you the production of Spamalot that I had the opportunity to direct over the summer, I went in with the intention of joy, and everybody walked out feeling joy. So mission accomplished. And that's a very valid thing to do. That's what we're supposed to be doing in theater. But what do you say to a lot of people will give you the excuse, and I'm going to call it an excuse, that, well, we have to play to the older demographic because most of your audience is senior citizens. And again, there's shows that have been written after 1980. I know there have. I know there is. So why aren't we seeing more of them?
There's been this terrible perception that musical theater hasn't been cool because young people always have to react against old people, something they have to do. My son is deeply ashamed of me, deeply, because I love musical theater. Oh, yeah, he keeps it very quiet. He mentions that my girlfriend was at Woodstock, that he'll say, but he won't say anything. So, yeah, it does have a stigma. There's no question about it. However, we're getting away from it. The worst is over. Shows like Glee have certainly helped. High School Musical some years ago helped, and now it's not the bad thing that it was, the strange and arcane thing that it was. And there are other adjectives I could use, too, that we all know that people have perceived the musical theater to be. But I do believe the worst is over.
Well, I have a question for you, if I may interrupt. We've been fortunate enough in the last few years, for better or for worse, to see musicals live on television again.
You actually read my mind.
The question that I want to ask you is, what are your thoughts about this whole world that has opened up of armchair critics, where the snarkiness and the snarks are out there waiting to attack everyone at every turn in the road? People just don't sit back and enjoy these musicals the way that we did when we were kids. They are sitting there with their text and their tweets and everything else. There are chat boards where their goals are to rip every actor apart. Where do you think that stems from, and what can people do to really combat that?
Well, everybody's a critic, of course, because we all have our opinions. We all have things that hit us one way or the other. Think about it. When you're in an audience, occasionally a joke will come out and one person will laugh wildly. So, I mean, that hit his chord. We all have so many different opinions and so many things that make us respond that inevitably there are going to be situations where we don't respond, and these people are going to take it out on everybody, partly because they would like to be doing this professionally, and because they cannot do it professionally, they're going to do it in an amateur setting. But what they are going to do is certainly show that they can be as severe as the severest critic, and I think that's where some of it comes from. Of course, there are a lot of people on the internet who write a lot of good things about shows, too, and they're really passionate fans, and that happens, too. But I do believe that, sad to say, a lot of this comes from a type of jealousy.
Where do you draw the line as a critic? Have you ever seen anything that you refuse to go in a realm that deep down in your heart you feel that you should write about, or do you just cross that line and deal with it?
Nobody agrees with the way I seem to be a critic, but I'm staying with it. I like to be a matchmaker. In other words, when I see a show, it doesn't interest me for 4 seconds if I like it or not. I'm thinking, okay, who will like this show? For example, at Crossroads Theater in New Brunswick, there was a show many years ago called Telltale Hearts. It was about people in a singles bar. So 2 people got together, 2 might get together, 2 didn't get together. I was thoroughly bored. However, I'm not young. I don't go to singles bar. I've been with the same woman for 38 years. I mean, I have nothing in common with this play. So should I slam it because I have nothing in common with it? Or do I say, hey, single people, you got to get down to Crossroads. You got to see this show because you're going to see people make bigger mistakes than you've ever made in a singles bar, and you're going to feel better about yourself. And I ended the review by saying, and by the way, maybe at intermission you'll meet somebody and you won't be single that much longer. Why not? What's the harm? And under those circumstances, they had to extend the play by weeks.
Wow.
And that's it. I have given so many good reviews to shows I have not liked personally, but I know there's an audience for them. Why not let them go? We're going to have a better society if people go to the theater.
Well, I think that that's extremely gracious because what you're doing is you're not letting your personal opinion get in the way. You're saying this show has merit because it's not for me, but it has merit for these reasons. And that's really, I think,
well, I may be crossing a line that I should not cross right now, so forgive me, the gods, watch after me. But one of my favorite shows on TV is Theater Talk. And there are a handful of critics that come on 2 or 3 times a year to talk about what's coming up in the season. And it's become, in the last year or so, a snark fest, where these are critics who are sitting there debunking shows before they've even gotten out of the starting gate. What are your thoughts on that, or do you want to plead the fifth on that?
No, not at all. Ironically enough, when people say to me, what are you looking forward to? I always say everything and nothing, because indeed I have learned that the show that is supposed to be the great hit of the season often isn't, and the one that nobody gave a thought to becomes very, very popular. So I will wait until I'm sitting in my seat to make any type of judgment, and I think it's crazy, even when there are wonderful people who work together. I mean, for example, there was a musical in 1965 that had the people who wrote Kiss Me, Kate doing the book, the guy who wrote the music for How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, and Guys and Dolls doing the score. Bob Fosse was doing the direction and choreography. How could it miss? It didn't even come to New York. It closed in Detroit. So the thing is, you just never know. So many of these things have to do with the way people get along. And in fact, Bob Fosse said on that show, we had a meeting, and I realized when we were talking about the show, each one of us saw the show in a completely different way. And that's when I said, let's close here. There's no sense in going on because you're going to want it to be this and I want it to be that and blah, blah, blah. So it's very, very hard. So I have no expectations going in, and yet I always have high expectations. I never tire of going. I go about 350 times a year. I've seen over 10,000 shows in my life, and I'm not remotely through yet.
Good. I'm glad to know that. Now, back to the television presentations of musicals, and we were very quickly speaking about Grease prior to going on the air, and I was saying that was the first Broadway show I ever got to see. So I think that some of my opinions are because that was the first Broadway show I ever saw.
Sure it is.
It impressed me so deeply that that's how it should be.
Yeah, any variation on the theme is going to strike you. So, oh my God, what are they doing? Yeah, yeah, sure.
And I mean, of course, I'm a fan of the movie. I've seen the movie 1,000 times.
I bet, yeah.
I am very... I'm very happy to see that Broadway is being brought to television because I think that a lot of people don't quite understand it. What are your opinions on the advent of these televised musicals?
Well, it's funny, so a lot of people don't like musicals because they say they're unrealistic, that people don't break into song in real life. Okay, fine, I'll accept that. However, when Bruce Springsteen goes up to a microphone, why is he singing and not talking? I mean, it's still a different type of art form. So as a result, it just seems a little more severe in a musical because you're hearing dialogue and suddenly they break into song. But it's a medium that you either go with or you can certainly look for its flaws. But no, I do think that so many times people are now getting away from fearing what these things are. And there are a lot of counter-arguments. I mean, Tom Hanks was on TV once talking about how he hated musicals because they were so unrealistic. Yeah, well, he was in the movie Big, in which you can't, it turns into an adult overnight. He was in Splash with... Anyway, there are a lot of movies. I mean, is Star Wars realistic? Is Jurassic Park realistic? No. So why don't we... by the way, there was almost a musical of Star Wars. seriously,
dear.
the guys who wrote Bye Bye Birdie wrote a couple of songs for it, and George Lucas says, stop right now. But anyway, but
Well,
those
I know
songs
what Gene
exist.
Kelly says. Gene Kelly says that when you can no longer say what you have to say, you sing it.
Just too
and
excited.
when you can
Yes,
no
that's
longer sing
actually-
it, you dance it. And I think, I think that when it organically comes together, there's nothing better. I do miss, however, these choreographers who really organically understood where they were coming, where the movement of the dance in the musical is coming from. Chita Rivera said that today you can take almost any dance number from any show, change the costumes, and the audience would not know the difference. And when she was starting out in the business, there were teachers that taught the Bob Fosse technique, or the Michael Bennett technique, or the Jerome Robbins technique.
They were very specific.
And so if word got out that there was going to be a new Jerome Robbins musical, people knew what they needed to be up on. And they went and they studied this. And I miss that type of dance in the musical theater.
What I miss is the fact that the audience today reacts to every number as if it's one of the greatest things that's ever happened, when so many of them are just very lackluster. Because, we lost a whole generation of choreographers, not only to AIDS, but to the British musicals, because the British musicals had very little dancing in them. Cats, of course, had a lot of movement, but it didn't even win the Tony Award for Best Choreography that year. So, but where's the dancing in Les Mis? Where's the dancing in Phantom of the Opera? Where's the dancing in Miss Saigon? All those mammoth musicals
Well,
got
this
us
is
away.
radio, or I would show you the dance movement from Les Mis, and we all know it.
It's the box step. I've relied on that wonderful box step.
But the thing is, the scenery was doing the dancing for us in
Right.
those shows, and that took up the slack. But so we've lost a lot in choreography, and that's why, because audiences haven't been used to seeing it, and because we used to see it on variety shows and TV once upon a time. We used to see these numbers on Ed Sullivan, but that's suddenly a long time ago, almost 45 years ago, since he was on the air. So under those circumstances, we do have a tough time seeing choreography today that's going to really impress those of us who are aficionados of the Broadway musical.
Okay, but in the classic form I would call that the classic Broadway musical.
Yeah.
Whereas the new incarnation, I had the wonderful opportunity to see Something Rotten.
Oh, isn't it good?
Oh,
Yeah,
it was
I adore
so
it.
Oh, me too.
I've been 4
magnificent.
times, by the way.
No, it's a great show.
And there is a few musical numbers, but it's so tongue in cheek because the whole story of Something Rotten is the musical. Well, what do you mean, a show with music? Yeah, so it's
Because it takes place in the 1600s during
yes,
Shakespeare's
Well, of
time.
it's delightful. It's an
yeah.
absolutely delightful.
Yes, I do view that musical number called A Musical, in which a soothsayer says in the future there are going to be musicals, and I'm tuning in and out. I'm seeing some, I'm not seeing others, I'm seeing little bits, as one of the greatest top 10 production numbers I've ever seen.
I have to
so, too.
agree with you. I absolutely
Oh,
agree
agree
good.
with
We're
you.
getting along.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, we were very similar. Now, I'm going to let you talk about. You've given me this wonderful opportunity to take this man's opinions and about.
We'll tell people how they can get the book.
How can they get the book?
It's available in fine bookstores everywhere, if you can find a fine bookstore anywhere. But I guess you get the Great Parade at Amazon.com more than any other place.
Well,
that's where it
what
seems
I
to
can
be.
tell you,
Yeah.
Peter, is my promise to you is that all of a sudden this book is going to, Let's Put On a Musical, is going to anonymously arrive at many of the local theater groups that I
Oh,
work
what a good
with.
idea! Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. With a plain brown wrapper that says "from a
Yes.
friend." Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's a good idea. Yes.
You will eliminate many fist fights. Thank you.
Or start some. That's been known to happen too. So the new book we're going to be celebrating this weekend. Thank you, Richard
This
Skipper, for doing
Saturday
this.
for the American Popular Song Society. And I just want to give you the list
Yeah,
as
sure.
it just came out hot off the press
Hot off the
tonight.
press.
But we have Clea Blackhurst.
Oh, she's so wonderful.
Give a little comment about each of these people.
I certainly will.
Okay.
Clea Blackhurst was phenomenal in Hello, Dolly at the
Agreed.
Good Street Opera House. She was
We
also
were there
terrific.
the same night.
Right, and a great performance in Merman's Apprentice a few weeks ago at Birdland, in which she was playing Ethel Merman, which she has been known to do. She actually has a whole show about Ethel Merman, and of course Ethel Merman did wind up doing Hello, Dolly in her final Broadway appearance. So she's good for this 63-64 season.
And a shout out to Stephen Cole, who did a phenomenal job.
Phenomenal. Oh, if the world were a smarter place, Stephen Cole would have 6 shows running on Broadway.
Absolutely. Stephen Brinberg.
Steven Bridberg, the Barbara Streisand impersonator. Indeed, I've seen him do Funny Girl down in Asbury Park, so he should be right for this, because Funny Girl is indeed one of the shows from the 63-64
But he will be
season.
appearing as himself.
Okay,
which
I can
is
take
a
it.
rarity.
Yes,
So
right.
people, Jim Brochu.
Jim Brochu's a buddy. He's actually done readings of a play that I wrote, so we go way back, and he's just a tremendous performer, very, very warm, and I love his stories about going to school with Stephen Schwartz and how they felt about Fiddler on the Roof, the second night of the show that they went together, though Jim had a better seat than Stephen.
Danny Gardner and Alika Emerson.
I don't know them. Tell me about them.
Well, Danny Gardner, did you see the recent revival of Dames at Z?
Sure.
He was lucky.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, how wonderful.
And
He
his
was terrific.
girlfriend, they're doing, should I tell you what they're doing?
Sure.
Come Play With Me.
Oh, that's from Anyone Can Whistle.
That's right.
A show that only lasted 9 performances, but here it is 51 years later, and people are still talking about it. It still
And
gets
still
done. Hey,
still
I saw
doing
a
it.
production at Westfield High School 2 years ago that was one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen. They had an orchestra that sounded exactly like the original cast album. The only difference was the voices were better than we get on the original cast album, because Lee Remick and Angela Lansbury was just starting out in musicals then. She was finding her way, and Harry Guardino sounded terrible, but not on Westfield High School stage. There's a guy named Daniel Devlin who does miracles out there with those kids. So, again, what we were talking about earlier.
Yes. So a good shout out to
Diane
Westfield.
Finley.
Oh, I love Diane. Diane, I have to admit, I surprised her once in an elevator when we were taking the elevator ride. She turned to me and said, "Hi, I'm Diane Finley." And I said, "The woman who sang God Save the Fig Tree in comedy in Boston in 1972, a musical that closed out of town." She looked like she'd been shot through the head, so we've been friends ever since. Because there aren't many people who can say, "You were great in that show," so.
Well, Diane Finley is a very dear friend of mine, and, for those of you who are not familiar with her work, she's a true journeyman actress. She's working all the time. She is going to be coming to Broadway next year in a new musical called Gotta Dance.
Oh, nice.
Which is the
It's
Jerry
one-
Mitchell musical.
Oh, in Chicago, that one.
No, it's based on Dori Berinstein's documentary.
Chicago.
It's in Chicago.
They did it in Chicago.
Oh, it's in Chicago. I thought you meant Chicago, the musical.
No.
That's where my brain went.
That's funny.
Leah Horowitz,
Oh, I love Leah. Yeah, she's a terrific performer. Yeah, I've seen her in a lot of things. Go on.
Michael Kastroff.
Michael, one of my Michael and I met at a party once, so we had such a long talk about musicals that I know that he really knows his onions.
Sally Mays.
Sally Mays, indeed, whom we all discovered in Welcome to the Club, a short-run show, but boy, did she shine in it. She didn't come in until the second act, but what a breath of fresh air. She almost saved it. If they'd given her more to do, I think that show would have run more than 17 performances.
Sean McDermott.
I like Sean. Sean's very, very good. I saw him, in fact, when he was in college.
Maureen McNamara.
Maureen and I go back a long way, not personally, but she was in a musical called Festival in 1978, in which she was so delightful. Also, Ted Chapin, when he was running the lab reviews at the Amphitheater, now the August Wilson Theater, she was one of the most fetching performers in it, and I just fell in love with Maureen right then and there. She was also in Ain't Broadway Grand, a musical about Mike Todd, and she was Joan Blondell in that incarnation of that show. So she's a terrific talent.
Barbara Minkus.
Barbara Minkus, who I saw in The Education of Hyman Kaplan way back in 1968. Yeah, she stopped the show with a song called When Will I Learn? And also, my best friend's mother says she's one of the greatest performers she ever saw doing Funny Girl in summer stock, which she did for quite a while.
Sarah Rice.
Sarah Rice, yes indeed, from Sweeney Todd, yes indeed, tremendous performer. Joanna and Sweeney Todd, a wonderful, wonderful memory for all of us.
Danielle Aaron Rhodes.
Oh, I don't know Danielle.
Well, Michael Levine, who is our wonderful musical director, brought us together. So, Michael Levine.
Michael Levine. Oh, can he tickle the ivories? Well, let's say caresses the ivories, because tickle is just too blithe a word. I mean, he's really so good at this. And is there anybody who knows more about Broadway music than Michael Levine, who really should rent a warehouse for all the sheet music he has, because it's overwhelming him in his apartment, because there's very little he doesn't have. And that might even be an overstatement to say very little. So good for Michael. He's great.
Steve Ross.
Steve Ross, really? Oh, how nice. Steve was at Barnes & Noble a few years ago when another book of mine came out about Tony losers, actually. and did a few songs from such Tony losers as Camelot. Camelot didn't even get nominated for Best Musical this year. Was considered that much of a disappointment? Isn't that something?
Yeah.
And they only nominated 3 that year. You know, when they nominate 4 and you're the 5th musical, you can say, well, we missed by an eyelash. But when they only pick 3 and they leave a slot open, they're really telling you they don't like you.
Yes,
so that's what they were telling Camelot way back when.
And last but certainly not least, Camille Saviola.
Camille from 9. Camille was in those same lab reviews as Maureen McNamara. This will be a nice reunion for them. They were both sensational in those reviews.
And, you know, and then to top that off, you and I will be sitting and talking about the reason why we're there. And that's this great book, The Great Parade, Broadway's astonishing, never to be forgotten 1963-64 season. Go ahead.
Well, it was astonishing in the sense that in the same season you got Barbra Streisand in her last appearance ever on Broadway, Carol Burnett, who wouldn't return to Broadway for another 25 years, Burt Lahr, the famous Cowardly Lion, in his last Broadway appearance, and he got a Tony Award for it. Mary Martin was there, Steve Lawrence was there, Carol Channing, of course, in the biggest hit of the season, Hello, Dolly, which would wind up as Broadway's longest-running musical by the time all was said and done. So it was really quite a year, and it was amazing at the Tonys that year that when Barbra Streisand and Carol Channing went toe-to-toe as Best Actress for a Musical, for the second time in a row, Barbra Streisand lost. She lost a couple of years earlier for I Can Get a Few Wholesale to Phyllis Newman in Subway's Off for Sleeping. And I'm not saying that's the reason Barbra Streisand has ever come back to Broadway. They don't appreciate me. I'm not saying that. I don't think she likes doing 8 a week, but still, I have a feeling, though, if the Tonys are on TV, which they wouldn't be for 3 more years, I think Barbra Streisand would have won that year, because now there's a concerted effort. Let's give each show something so that they can promote it in the ads. I mean, the Tonys are a type of infomercial, and under those circumstances, I think that they would have thrown Barbra Streisand a bone, so to speak, and that way they could trumpet. But the Tonys weren't that famous then. When they used to advertise, it was always the New York Critics Circle. They used to advertise more than the Tonys, but that all changed in '67 when they went to network TV.
Now, let's talk about the season a little bit. The season went from when to when?
The Broadway season is usually considered from June 1st to May 31st because actors' contracts start on June 1st. That's the way they did them from time immemorial. So if you get any of the books like Theater World or the Best Plays book or any of those books that are annuals, you will find that they go from a June to May schedule.
And I want to talk a little bit about your process in writing this book. When you first got the idea of writing this book, and of course it's a great theme, where did it start? How did you begin your project?
My editor and I were just tossing around ideas, and I was talking about what differences had happened in 50 years, that Broadway had changed so much in 50 years, and he said, wow, that's tell me more. And I said, well, for example, in 63, 64, for one thing, tickets were $9.90 for musicals and $6.90 for plays. Wow. So that's a big change, certainly, to say the least. If you use an inflation calendar, now musical tickets, the highest ticket should be $74.31, and for plays it should be $63.42. Well, we all know it's not that. It's substantially more. So, and of course, with premium seats coming in, where they can go as high as $477. I'm not kidding. I know that people will not believe it, but anyway.
No, it is true. But I have to interrupt and ask you a question. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that this ridiculous inflation of ticket prices occurred? And if by contrast it was what you said just now, $60-something, and do you think Broadway would be more accessible, and do you think it would have a different feel to it?
No question. The prices have hurt tremendously. The Broadway League did a survey, and they said that a heavy theater goer, I'm not talking weight, no, I'm talking about attendance, a heavy theater goes 4 times a year. 4 times a year. That's not much at all. However, at these prices, frankly, I bet it's 3 times now, not 4, since I saw that survey. So the prices really do cause so many people to think 3 or 4 times before they go out. I mean, I know so many times at the Star Ledger in the lunchroom, people come up to me and say, my wife and I went to a show last night, and they talk so vividly about the experience because it cost them $500 to $1,000 to do it with the kids. So it's a tough thing.
Well, let me ask you this. Excuse me for interrupting, but hypothetically, What was the theater going public like in 1963 and 64 as compared to today's theater going audience?
It was a much more New York-centric crowd. New Yorkers don't go to the theater as much as they used to. Now it's mostly tourists. And think about it. Population has expanded and tourism has expanded, and the theaters are basically the same size. They've tried to squeeze in a few more seats in a few of them. But, the theaters that had 1,600 seats 50 years ago have maybe, about 1,610 now. But the population has really grown, and tourism is really something. I Love New York has really helped people to get to New York. And people who come to New York feel, all right, this once in my life, I will go see a Broadway show and say that I had that experience. And so they're willing to put out the money. But for New Yorkers, it's become something that they've been able to avoid, and partly because living in the city is so expensive. College is so expensive. Prep school is so expensive. Grammar school and kindergarten and all those other schools for your children. People are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars to send their kids to school. So the idea of going out and seeing a Broadway show is a luxury they simply cannot afford.
But when did the shift take place between people really dressing to go to the theater and making it a very special event to this lackadaisical quality that just this past year I saw in the news, they were interviewing people as they were coming out of Les Mis, and they were in shorts and sandals and T-shirts, and they looked worse than they would have looked if they had gone to the beach. When and why did that happen?
Well, it's funny. I know in 1965, Alexander Cohen, the producer, said, nobody will get into my musical Baker Street unless they are wearing a shirt and tie and a dress, and that's going to be it. I want those standards to be enforced. That's when the show opened in February. That September, I walked by the theater to see if indeed that was being enforced. Hardly. The tickets for Baker Street were very easy to get, and he would take anybody walking in a sunsuit. So, no, it was really, certainly after the hippie revolution of the 60s, people were dressing down in every conceivable way, and that certainly affected the theater as well. So it was right after the 60s, and certainly you go to the theater and you see Hair in 1968 and look at the way the people look on stage. Why should you dress up for them?
Well, exactly.
And they weren't dressed, but that's besides the point.
What do you think?
But what I do remember, when I was in college, and I'm sorry to...
No, go ahead.
We're both so excited to be talking. I think that was pretty much the beginning of TKTS.
Which I think has been a bad thing for the theater, frankly.
Really?
TKTS is the half-price booth in Duffy Square on 47th Street.
Right.
It was a great deal when it opened. The first ticket I ever bought at the booth was for Seesaw, a musical that was charging $15. My ticket was $8.50 because it was $7.50, which was half price, and a service charge of $1.
Right.
But it didn't take long for producers to realize, if we double the price, then we can send the tickets that we're not selling to the half-price booth, and we will get what we would have gotten if they had sold at full price. And if we're a big hit, people will pay whatever to get in. I mean, the ticket prices now that are you see online from various sources for Hamilton are totally unbelievable.
They're insane.
Yeah, they really are. You better win a lottery if you're going to... I don't mean the lottery to get into Hamilton. I mean the lottery.
The lottery.
Yeah.
They're basically a mortgage payment.
They are.
But I do remember when I was in college, and it was an exciting and fun thing for my friends and I to do, that we would go to TKTS, and we just called it Adventure Day. And
yes,
we'd go
indeed.
there
Potluck.
and say, what do you want to see?
Yeah.
And we'd see whatever.
Yeah.
And it was affordable. I was a student, so it was affordable.
Yeah.
And then we'd go get something to eat after. And it was a wonderful way to experience theater. Even now, but now I couldn't afford it, and I'm a grown woman, and even TKTS is a bit steep.
Absolutely. Of course it's steep. No question about that whatsoever. And anything involving the prices is a very unfortunate thing. But, for example, when Fiddler on the Roof opened in 1964, tickets were $9.90. When Fiddler closed 8 years later, tickets were $9.90. They didn't raise the prices at all.
Wow.
Yeah. Starting with Bubbling Brown Sugar in 1975, whenever ticket prices went up, the shows that had already been in existence raised their prices too. I mean, Chorus Line, when Chorus Line opened, you were paying $15 a seat. When Chorus Line closed, you were paying $47.50 a seat. Okay. So they just upped the prices. Now, that's really not quite fair, because when you think of it, these shows were built to take in whatever the prices were then. And so asking for more money is technically greedy. However, on the other hand, producers have such a hard time of it in terms of raising money. I mean, in the 63-64 season, most of the shows were produced by one person. David Merrick was very famous for producing shows on his own, but in fact, my friend Josh Ellis, who was a Broadway press agent for a number of years and was David Merrick's press agent, got out of the business saying, now there are 40 producers, and every one of them thinks he's David Merrick, and every one of them is coming up to me and saying, you know what you should be doing, and it contradicts what somebody else is saying, and you can't please everybody anymore.
No.
So that's a hard thing, too, because getting these shows on, I mean, in the 63-64 season, a play came in usually for under $100,000 and a musical for under $500,000. And today, of course, we're talking about millions for shows that have far fewer production values than these shows did back in 63-64.
And one of the other big issues is you spend a lot of money to go to see a show. And then the people sitting around you are texting and tweeting and doing, their phones are going off. And I went to see a production of Orphans a couple of years ago at Penguin Rep, if you've ever been out there.
Stone Point. Yeah.
And in the most dramatic moment of the show, a woman in the front row, her cell phone went off, and she couldn't find it in her purse. And the actress had to stop the show to go on. But even picking up where they left off, that moment was gone forever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you need that momentum to continue.
But I just wanted to say one thing, just to add on to that. And then just a couple of years ago with Godspell on Broadway, the lead producer on that show set up a tweeting section in the theater for people to text and tweet. I wrote a letter to Actors Equity because I said this is a very slippery slope. And it's setting a very bad precedent, and I cannot believe that. And his enticement, as he said, was to bring in a younger audience, and this is the way that they're used to watching theater. But if an actor is doing something on stage and you're not totally engaged with that actor on the stage, you're missing the experience of what live theater is all about.
I feel bad that there's been such a concerted effort to get a young audience on the young people's terms. I would love to see people come in and appreciate good theater on adult terms. When I was a kid, I went to see a musical called No Strings, and looking back on it now, it was a story of a black woman and a white man and living in France, and they're getting away with it because they're living in France where standards are different. And looking back on it now, I understood maybe around 30% of the show. And yet, what I did understand was enough for me. And I remember there's a lyric in the show about Hobson's choice. All right, I didn't understand what that meant, but it sent me to the dictionary. I don't think there are many lyrics today that would send anybody to the dictionary because they're so simplistic. So it is sort of sad. When I was a kid, what I loved about Broadway entertainment, that it was sophisticated. Now that I'm sophisticated, I often have to go to Broadway and see kids' entertainment. What can you do?
The recent director of this recent I'm going to call it a debacle because it was, of the latest film version of Annie. The director of that film said the reason that he wanted to update the story was because when he went to the theater and they were singing "We'd Love to Thank You, Herbert Hoover," that he knew that the kids around him had no frame of reference as to who Herbert Hoover is. And I said, well, that's an opportunity to educate these kids.
That's absolutely right. I mean, that's a social studies class right there. Because we're talking about the Great Depression. Let's go, that's a social studies class. That is called cooperative learning.
And it's easier now than it used to be with the internet. I mean, I remember looking up names that were totally unfamiliar to me when I was a kid looking at these Broadway shows. Out of This World, a Cole Porter show, mentioned all these gods and goddesses from Roman and Greek times, and I didn't know who they were, but it got me to the library to go looking. Now, of course, it's a few keystrokes, so the kids can do it.
But either way, you have to have the innate curiosity in which to go about and do that, and not just sit there and, not be interested enough to find out. It's to pique curiosity. It's to try and whet the appetite of learning.
Well, I've talked about this before. When I was growing up, I had a mentor, Miss Epps. Florence Epps, may she rest in peace. And Florence, we would have these classes, and I would be reading, and she would say, "Who is Ethel Barrymore?" And if I didn't know, she would close the book and she'd say, "Our class is over for today. And I will see you next week and know who Ethel Barrymore is." And she would come in and she would ask me 3 questions about these great people. And she said to me, wanting to pursue a career in the theater, that I was carrying the mantle of all of these great artists that have gone before me. And another thing, I feel that we and thank God for what you do, Peter, because I feel that we are losing our history. There's not even a theater museum in New York.
Yeah,
and Madame
sad.
Tussauds Wax Museum on 42nd Street, and just follow my thinking on
I
it.
know what you're going to say.
It celebrates every area of pop culture except our great Broadway icons.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's right there in the theater
Sure,
district.
sure.
He's right.
I mean, why don't we have Gertrude Lawrence and Mary Martin and Carol Channing and Yul Brynner and Robert Preston on display at Madame Tussauds Wax Museum?
I think it's a great idea, and I wish it would happen. I've always been astonished that there hasn't been any type of museum for Broadway. Several lasted. A few attempts have been made. There used to be one in the Minskoff Theater Arcade that was there for a while, but it didn't really quite last. It's a hard thing to do for a lot of people because what we're talking about is really an ephemeral art. There isn't much to see of Gertrude Lawrence. You can
That
see the
is
movie
true.
of the Glass Menagerie, but that isn't what she's really known for. And that's the thing about theater. When it's gone, it's gone. I mean, one of the reasons people, some people, not all people, enjoy talking to me is because I've been paying attention to the Broadway musical for well over a half century, and I saw shows that a lot of people didn't. And what was that like? You know, I mean, for example, Mary Tyler Moore and Richard Chamberlain were in a show, a musical version of Breakfast at Tiffany's,
They were.
and it was a big disaster. It didn't even open in New York. They had a few previews, and David Merrick, the producer, said, "You know, this show is so bad, I cannot do this to the public. I'm closing it." But anyway, what was so interesting is even though it didn't get a recording at the time, it since has, but at the time, I kept that show alive because people would say to me, "What was it like?" And I'd be singing snatches of the songs, and I would remember the songs simply because so many people asked me about it. But, you know, if you want to be an expert in film, you can really do it in a year's time by watching every important movie or even every unimportant movie. It can be done. But for theater, no, you had to be there. And I'm glad I was.
I think that we also need to expose young people to more theater in every way possible, and now we can, circle back to community and local theater, and not just performing in it, but the history of theater. Just a quick story. When I was doing the show over the summer, some friends came to see it, and they had one of the friends had his daughters.
This was
with
Spamalot.
Spamalot, yes, and the two girls, and I saw them after the intermission was over go backstage, and then I could tell they weren't going to the restroom, which was off the side, and they came back, and I said to them, "You need to remain in your seats," because you could tell they were wandering. And I spoke to my other friend about it afterwards. I said, I had to tell them to remain in their seats. She said, they didn't know what to expect. They'd never been to a live theater production before. They were so amazed at what was going on that they wanted to go backstage and see what it was like. I was, as a director, as a teacher, as a parent, I was so upset because that was an opportunity for me to teach. That was an opportunity for me to open that world to them, and I didn't get that opportunity because I wasn't made aware of it sooner. If they had told me after the production, I would have dragged them right backstage and showed them the costumes and showed them our props and showed them how we made the wall churn in this production. And that's what I really want to see young people learn about the theater. Yes, experience it by doing it, but let's learn about how we did it back in the day.
Your point you made earlier, too, about giving self-confidence and all that, the statistics prove the kids who do shows in high school get better grades.
Oh,
than
that's
kids who
true.
They
don't.
do.
Absolutely.
And
it's not just that, it builds a sense of community.
Yes, they do.
Teamwork.
Teamwork, knowing what it's like to do this. I want to ask you, going back to this book, what do you hope ultimately that readers will come away with after reading this book?
I really want them to see that there was a time when Broadway was smarter than it is now. I was on a panel once with a critic who, a young critic, who said, people always romanticize the past, but there was junk back then. Abie's Irish Rose and Tobacco Road, those were terrible shows, so on and so forth. And you know how you always come up with a great answer 3 days later that you should have said right at the time. And my answer would now be, Adam, in any courtroom trial, what is more valuable, hearsay or eyewitness testimony.
Thank you. That is a wonderful response, actually.
I was there. All you have is hearsay. The devil can cite scripture to serve his purpose, and you can certainly mention Tobacco Road and A.B.'s Irish Rose, which weren't great pieces of literature, no. But the bottom line is that there was a time when Broadway was stronger in terms of artistic merit than it is now. We're going through a period. It's going to change. 100 years ago, the musicals were very silly, very frothy. They were called princess shows. They had characters with names like May Wine, that type of thing. So we're going through that period, and somebody along the way is going to do what Rodgers and Hammerstein did in 1943, saying, "Look, we've got to let the musical grow up, and we're going to get into very good times." I don't know if I'll live to see them, but the young people today are going to see their musical theater change, and I think for the better. But of course, I always have been an optimist, or else how could I be interested in musicals where there are songs like Happy Talk and Put on a Happy Face, and you got to have heart, and the sun will come out tomorrow.
Well, I want to thank you, first of all, for being here tonight. And I do want to remind everyone that you and I are going to sit down and chat once again on Saturday afternoon at 322 West 48th Street. That's local 802, Musicians Hall. And we will be discussing your book, which people can get on Amazon, but I would prefer that they show up on Saturday.
Okay.
And you'll sign it right then and there for them.
And I'm going to pipe in here and once again plug the other book. I'm begging all local theater companies, let's put on a musical, how to choose the right show for your school, community, or professional theater. And if it anonymously shows up in your mailbox,
we know who's responsible.
It's mine. And so, believe it or not, our hour has just about come to an end. Peter, I cannot thank you enough for the honor of you coming to my show.
God love you.
Richard, you're also performing this coming Sunday.
Sunday, I'm getting back on the boards again.
Which is
What are
very
you doing?
exciting.
Me.
Me.
That's enough, isn't
Yes.
it?
So I'm doing a show. Well, for 16 years, I've done a free concert for the Helen Hayes Hospital. And it's, free is the operative word. And it's just a celebration. As you know, I call myself Richard Skipper Celebrates. And it's all about celebrating the arts.
Good.
And that's why I love what you do so much.
Thanks so much.
Yes,
Thank you.
And again, you've been listening to Talk of the Town on broadbandboxoffice.com. Please like us on Facebook. And if you ever have an idea for a show or something you'd like to hear more about, let us know that too. Until then, we will see you the second Tuesday of next month. My name is Lisa Dascoli. Richard, thank you, my friend,
you so
as
much.
always. Peter Filichia, thank you for this evening.